The farm that eats the dark. You do not begin with machines. You begin with a number on a screen that should not be moving that fast. A power price jumps. A fuel shortage ripples through a region. Gas contracts tighten. Industrial users start whispering about curtailment. Politicians call it temporary. Grid operators use calmer language, demand response, load balancing, emergency procurement. But what it means, in plain terms, is that electricity has stopped being invisible. It has become a battlefield. And this is when you decide to build a mining farm. Not before the crisis, when cheap energy made everyone look smart during it. When every kilowatt has a moral shadow, when transformers are booked months out, when generators smell like desperation, when the public has started asking a very simple question with a very dangerous tone behind it. Why should your machines get power when homes are being told to conserve? That is the first truth. From the outside, a mining farm looks like a warehouse full of boxes solving math for money. From the inside, it feels more like trying to construct an engine in the middle of a siege. And every stage upward costs more than the last. Stage 1. The seduction of pure arithmetic at the beginning. Everything feels clean. You sit with spreadsheets, hash rate projections, break-even curves, capital expenditure models. The numbers are almost elegant in their cruelty. If the network difficulty moves one way, you survive. If it moves another, you drown. If your energy stays below a certain threshold, the machines are assets. Above it, they become expensive heaters with fans attached. This is the stage most people misunderstand because it still feels intellectual, strategic, remote. You can convince yourself this is a business built on discipline, not appetite. You tell yourself you are not chasing a fever. You are buying distressed hardware. You are capturing inefficiency. You are exploiting market dislocation. You give the impulse better language. What changes here is not your skill. It is your relationship to uncertainty. Before this, volatility was something you watched. Now you are planning your life around it. You learn to think in strange units, not hours, but uptime. Not temperature, but thermal envelope. Not money, but power cost per coin mind. You start seeing the world in load curves and margin compression. A cold morning is no longer weather. It is cheaper cooling. A regional gas shortage is not a headline. It is a threat vector. And the hidden cost arrives early, obsession disguised as analysis. Because the spreadsheet never tells you what the room will sound like at 3:17 in the morning, when 40 machines are screaming at full fan speed, and you realize that profit, in its raw mechanical form, is loud enough to alter your heartbeat. Stage 2. The search for power, then the real world begins. A mining farm is not built where the internet is best, or where land is cheap, or where your friends say business is easy. It is built where power can be found, secured, negotiated, and survived. That changes everything. Now, you are driving through industrial districts at dusk, looking at forgotten facilities with rust on the chain link fence and enough amperage behind the wall to matter. Old manufacturing shells, cold storage sites, abandoned workshops, edge-of-town warehouses near substations no one outside utility planning departments has ever cared about. You stop thinking like an entrepreneur and start thinking like a scavenger with engineering vocabulary. How many megawatts can this site truly support? What does the transformer history look like? What is the feeder constraint? How old is the switchgear? Can the utility upgrade the service? And if they can, will they do it before the next winter panic? Here, the pressure becomes institutional. You are no longer arguing with markets. You are negotiating with utilities, landlords, inspectors, electricians, and local officials who hear the word mining and either smell fraud or political liability. Most people misunderstand this stage because they think access to power is a technical problem. It is not. It is a social one wearing a technical uniform. The grid is not a neutral machine. It is a hierarchy of permissions. Some facilities get priority because they are legacy customers, some because they know the right intermediary, some because their load profile is easier to integrate, some because they are politically harder to say no to, and your project, unless you are already large, usually enters the conversation as an inconvenience. So you learn new skills, not glamorous ones, patience, credibility, fluency in systems you do not control. You learn how to sound less like a speculator and more like a flexible industrial load. You emphasize curtailment readiness, demand response participation, grid balancing cooperation. You learn that language is infrastructure too, and the hidden cost here is dignity. Because you can have capital, machines, forecasts, conviction, and still stand in a fluorescent office explaining to someone with a clipboard why your business deserves electrons in a season when everyone else is being told to use less. Stage 3, the machine behind the wall once power is possible, the farm stops being an idea. Now, it needs a body. This is where the hardware arrives, or fails to pallets, crates, ASICs wrapped in static bags, power distribution units, breakers, racks, cable trays, exhaust containment, monitoring sensors, spare fans, spare control boards, spare power supplies because something always dies, and everything is late. This is the stage where logistics become psychological warfare, customs delays, shipping costs, component shortages, the wrong voltage on a batch, the right machines with the wrong firmware, the correct racks with incompatible fasteners. The transformer promised in 6 weeks becomes 12. 12 becomes we are monitoring the situation. Outsiders, imagine that when the machines show up, you have crossed the hard part. In truth, arrival is the beginning of fragility, because what changes now is the speed at which money can rot in stillness. Every day, a machine remains boxed, unpowered, or improperly tuned. It is not neutral. It is decaying opportunity. In a fast-moving network, delay is a form of loss. You begin living among objects that convert delay into pressure. A silent crate becomes accusatory. A row of unplugged units looks like trapped revenue. The facility takes on that unfinished smell: dust, cardboard, fresh cable jackets, concrete, hot metal not yet hot enough. And the work itself becomes less abstract. You are checking line voltage. You are managing airflow. You are calculating amperage by rack, so you do not create a failure point with your own impatience. You are learning that bad cable management can become heat, and heat becomes instability, and instability becomes cascading downtime. Then comes the deeper misunderstanding. People think mining hardware is built for endurance because it looks industrial. It is not. It is built for stress. Those are different things. These machines are optimized to live hard, not live long. They inhale dust. They hate humidity. They punish bad power quality. They convert electricity into heat with a kind of ruthless honesty that makes the whole building feel like a confession. The hidden cost here is the end of distance. You are no longer investing in infrastructure. You are physically responsible for a room full of expensive, fragile heat, producing liabilities that only make sense while they are running. Stage 4. The sound of conversion, then the farm comes alive, and whatever fantasy remained leaves your body. A real mining farm does not hum. It roars, not like a factory in the movies, not like a server room behind glass. This is a harsher sound, higher, more relentless. The combined pitch of high RPM fans, power supplies under load, air force through metal fins, heat being moved because if it is not moved, everything stops, conversation becomes gesture. You feel the pressure in your jaw. You walk the aisles and your clothes hold the smell of hot electronics long after you leave. This is the stage where the emotional architecture changes. Before, you were building. Now you are feeding. Every second, the farm runs. It consumes. Power, attention, maintenance hours. Replacement parts. Your ability to rest without mentally checking dashboards. One machine drops offline. Maybe it is nothing. 5 machines drop. Now you are tracing upstream causes. An inlet temperature creeps higher. Hash rate wobbles. A breaker trips. An exhaust path is obstructed. A firmware update behaves strangely. Somewhere, a fan begins to fail with that thin rising whine. That means more work by sunrise. What most people misunderstand about this stage is that scale does not create calm. It creates new forms of vulnerability. A small rig is a hobby you can babysit. A farm is a living load with dozens of ways to punish neglect. You learn the rituals: thermal scans, dust checks, reboots done in the right order, spare inventory counted like ammunition, remote monitoring windows open on one screen, utility price alerts on another. You learn to interpret the language of alarms, not just what failed, but whether failure is isolated, systemic, or contagious. And during an energy crisis, another pressure enters the room, guilt with numbers attached. Because outside the walls, the same power has become expensive enough to change how families live. Thermostats lowered, appliances deferred, storefronts dimmed, factories reduced to partial shifts. Public language hardens waste, greed, opportunism. Extraction. You tell yourself your load is interruptible. You tell yourself you can shut down at peak demand. You tell yourself you are building flexibility into a strained system. Some of that may even be true, but truth, in a crisis, is rarely the same thing as innocence. That is the hidden cost here. The machines do not just make noise. They give ethical pressure a physical sound. Stage 5. The grid remembers you exist at a certain level. You stop being invisible. This is when the farm enters its next rank, not merely operational, but noticed. The utility knows your name now. The neighbors do too. So do local journalists if the season is bad enough. A heat wave, a fuel shortage, rolling conservation notices. Suddenly, your power draw is no longer a private commercial arrangement. It becomes a public symbol people can point at. This changes your responsibilities in ways no spreadsheet prepares you for. You are no longer managing only equipment and margins. You are managing narrative. You need curtailment policies, response procedures, documentation, a real answer for why your operation should exist inside a stressed energy landscape. You need the ability to power down fast and the discipline to do it before someone else forces the decision. You need to understand not just your economic threshold, but the political threshold beyond which efficiency stops mattering. Most people misunderstand this stage because they think controversy arrives only if you do something wrong. Sometimes controversy arrives because you are legible. A mining farm is useful to blame because it is easy to imagine. Rows of machines, vast consumption, digital reward. It fits a modern anxiety perfectly that somewhere someone has found a way to turn shared infrastructure into private heat and private gain. So you adapt. You participate in demand response. You shed load on command. You monitor price spikes with the paranoia of a military watch officer. You discover that in a crisis, staying alive is less about running constantly than about knowing when not to run at all. And that feels like betrayal at first. You spent months trying to energize every rack. Now discipline means shutting them off. The hidden cost is philosophical. You came to build a machine that extracts value from consistency. The energy crisis teaches you that survival belongs to flexibility. It is not the lesson you wanted. It is the one the grid imposes. Stage 6, winter, failure, and the narrowing margin. Every farm has a season when the romance dies completely. Usually, it is winter. Not because winter is always worst for cooling. Sometimes, cold air is a gift. But winter reveals dependencies. Fuel supply tightens. Transmission becomes less forgiving. Backup systems are tested by reality instead of planning assumptions. A single mechanical weakness, tolerable in mild weather, becomes an operational wound. This is the stage of attrition. Filters clog faster than you thought. Condensation becomes a real enemy if your thermal management is sloppy. A transformer issue upstream creates dirty power. A generator that seemed reassuring on paper becomes a financial nightmare when it actually has to run. Diesel deliveries are late. Repair crews are overbooked. One minor failure cascades because everyone else in the region is also trying to fix something, buy something, replace something. And the financial margin narrows with a cruelty that feels personal. Energy cost rises. Network difficulty does not care. Coin price may not save you. Machine efficiency matters more now than ambition ever did. Older units become borderline irrational to keep online, but turning them off means admitting that part of your build was already obsolete when you installed it. Most people misunderstand this stage because they think a farm fails through one dramatic disaster. More often, it fails through cumulative exhaustion, a week of small outages, a month of bad pricing, 2 delayed invoices, 3 machines cannibalized for parts, a team too tired to notice a pattern until it becomes damage. This is when the hidden cost turns inward. You become harder to talk to, more vigilant, less impressed by optimism. You stop hearing the roar as noise and start hearing it as obligation. Sleep becomes a shallow state filled with phantom alarms. Even in silence, your mind keeps checking for heat. At this level, building a mining farm during an energy crisis no longer feels like entrepreneurship. It feels like holding a perimeter. Stage 7. Scale stops feeling like victory if you survive long enough. The farm reaches that strange upper stage where it works well enough to frighten you. The dashboards stabilize. Uptime improves. Procedures harden into routine. You know which machines run hottest, which racks misbehave after voltage fluctuations, which technicians notice trouble before the monitoring software does. You have something real now. Not a concept. Not a gamble. A functioning industrial organism. This should feel like triumph. Instead, it often feels like captivity, because what changes at scale is the nature of your fear. Early on, you fear failure because you have not built enough. Later, you fear it because there is too much to lose. The fixed costs are larger. The reputational risk is larger. The maintenance burden is larger. The consequences of a bad week are more serious precisely because the operation is more legitimate. That is what outsiders miss about mastery. Competence does not simplify the emotional burden. It refines it. You are now responsible not only for machines, but for payroll, compliance, uptime guarantees, vendor relationships, utility trust, and the silent expectation that because the farm exists, it must continue existing. And yet the entire thing remains exposed to forces beyond your control. Market swings, regulation, public anger, weather, grid instability, hardware generations shifting beneath your feet like geology moving in fast forward. The hidden cost here is that success removes excuses. Once the farm is real, you can no longer comfort yourself with potential. Only performance counts. Every weakness is now yours. And slowly, the place changes you. You become fluent in thresholds other people never think about. You can smell overheated insulation before others notice. You can estimate load by ear. You walk into ordinary rooms and they feel too quiet, too cool, too detached from consequence. You have spent too long inside a building where electricity becomes sound, heat, and money in the same second. Normal life starts to feel imprecise. That is the tax no one advertises. Not just what the farm takes from the grid, what it takes from your nervous system. Final stage. What remains after the power in the end? The strangest part is not the risk. It is the intimacy. You spend enough time building a mining farm during an energy crisis, and you stop seeing energy as a utility. You see it for what it always was, negotiated survival. Fragile abundance. A chain of extraction, politics, engineering, weather, and human priority. So delicate that one fracture in one region can change the fate of an entire operation. The farm teaches you this lesson brutally. Every cable run is a claim on the future. Every machine is a wager that tomorrow's power will still be obtainable, tomorrow's public anger still containable, tomorrow's economics still survivable. And because you built during the crisis rather than before it, you never get the innocence of believing infrastructure is stable. You enter already knowing the lights can flicker. That knowledge never leaves. Even if the operation succeeds, some part of you remains in those aisles. Under the sodium yard light in the metallic air, watching frost gather outside while exhaust heat pours from louvers into the night. Listening for the slight change in fan pitch that means one unit somewhere is beginning to slip. This is what it feels like. Finally. Not like building the future, like bargaining with a stressed system and hoping it lets you stay. You begin thinking you are constructing a farm. What you are really constructing is a relationship with pressure, with scarcity, with the uncomfortable fact that modern wealth is often nothing more than controlled access to invisible force. And during an energy crisis, invisible force becomes visible again, in invoices, in shutdown notices, in public resentment, in the ache behind your eyes after another night of partial sleep, in the way a room full of machines can make you feel powerful for an hour and compromised for a year, because the last misunderstanding is the deepest one. People think the cost of building a mining farm is measured in land, hardware, and electricity. It is not. The real cost is what happens when you spend long enough turning power into strategy that you forget power was once just warmth, light, and the ordinary promise that when you flip a switch, something answers. After a while, you stop hearing that promise. You hear the grid breathing. You hear the market feeding on it. You hear your own ambition somewhere inside the noise, trying to sound reasonable. And then one night, long after the calculations and permits and negotiations and breakdowns, you step outside the facility, and the cold hits your face hard enough to remind you that the world beyond the walls is still dark, still fragile, still waiting for the next shortage. Behind you, the farm keeps roaring. Ahead of you, the town conserves. And between those two sounds industry and restraint, hunger and necessity. You finally understand what you built. Not a miracle, not a cheat code. A machine that only makes sense as long as the crisis has not decided to come for you next.